April 19th, 1775. After a dozen years of taxes, tarring, and rising tensions, the port of Boston has been closed in retaliation for the destruction of 342 crates of British East India Company tea. American colonials have responded by raising and arming militias across the colonies. Now, in the dead of night, an advanced contingent of British light infantry, directed by General Thomas Gage and in the command of Major John Pitcairn, has marched from Boston to Lexington on its way to Concord as part of an operation to seize colonial arms. Silversmith Paul Revere and tanner William Dawes have made midnight rides to Lexington to warn the countryside of the British movements. By 4:30, a group of about 80 American militiamen, led by Farmer John Parker, have gathered on the Lexington Green. 6 companies of British light infantry march into view, bayonets glistening. The redcoats they wear are known the world over. They are a fully trained professional fighting force. By some accounts, they outnumber the Americans 5-1. The militiamen are not blocking the road to Concord, yet for obvious reasons, Major Pitcairn is wary of an armed force mustering at his rear. He orders his companies into battle formation. "Lay down your arms, you damned rebels, and disperse!" After a short hesitation, the American captain does order his men to disperse, but, fatefully, does not order them to lay down their arms. A shot rings out. Fired by whom? A hot-headed British officer? An American provocateur from behind a hedge? No one knows. Nor do they quite realize the enormous import of what has just occurred. As it happens, the fate of the world has just changed forever. Several shots follow before the British regulars begin to volley, though they are not ordered to do so by Pitcairn. Before long, they are performing the signature move of a well-trained 18th century army, the bayonet charge. It is a rout. When the smoke in Lexington clears, 8 American militiamen have died, and at least 10 are wounded. Only 1 British soldier is injured, grazed in the leg. Before long, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith arrives with the main British force, about 700 men in all. With order restored, he continues the march toward Concord. 6 hours earlier, a third American messenger, Dr. Samuel Prescott, had escaped British patrols and successfully arrived in Concord to warn the town of the British march. 3 companies of the famed Massachusetts Minutemen, so named for their swiftness in preparing for battle, had gathered immediately in the town center. Upon the British approach, however, the Americans remain badly outnumbered. Colonel James Barrett withdraws the militia from town and onto Punkatasset Hill overlooking the North Bridge. Meanwhile, the Concord arms have been all but dispersed and hidden. Smith sends 3 companies of British soldiers across Northbridge to search Colonel Barrett's house, posts 3 more on the bridge, and sends the rest to secure Southbridge and search the taverns and homes in town. In the end, they find little in the way of weapons or ammunition, but do manage to set the courthouse on fire, though it is unknown if it is done deliberately. Alarmed by the flames and prepared to defend their town to the death, the colonials are drawn back to the North Bridge. The British regulars guarding the bridge number less than 100. Meanwhile, New England militiamen have arrived swiftly to join the glorious cause. By the time Colonel Barrett orders the Americans to advance, their numbers have swollen to 400. The redcoats fall back and assume position behind the bridge. For the second time that day, an unidentified individual fires. This time, it is likely a warning shot fired by a distressed British soldier. Whatever the case, the colonials return fire with "the shot heard round the world," later immortalized in Ralph Waldo Emerson's famous Concord hymn. 2 Americans are killed along with 3 regulars. Outnumbered, the British abandon their position and retreat back to the town center. The Americans, however, lose formation in the confusion following their success, and the 3 British companies sent to search Barrett's house manage to slip back across North Bridge unharmed. By noon, Smith and the British troops have completed their fruitless search and reassembled for the march back to Boston. They have already dallied too long. Over 1,000 American militiamen now surround the area, and their numbers continue to increase. A mile east of Concord, at Meriam's corner, Smith pulls in his flank car to cross a narrow bridge. Militiamen fire on the British line with deadly effect. It is the beginning of a long march for the mighty Redcoats. The Americans fire all along the road back to Boston, sometimes from behind trees, rocks, and even buildings and fences. At the so-called Bloody Angle, two sharp bends in the road separated by a mere 500 yards, the British suffer some 30 casualties, compared to just 4 for the Americans. By the time Smith and his men reach Lexington, the colonial militia has doubled again to 2,000. At Lexington, the British troops, beleaguered on every side, running low on ammunition and spirits, are heartened by the sound of reinforcements. Brigadier General Hugh Percy has arrived with 1,000 men and 2 artillery pieces. Responding to a call for reinforcements, Percy and his men had set out from Boston at about 9 in the morning, marching to the tune of a derisive song that would soon become a patriotic anthem for the Americans, ironically. At 2:30 in the afternoon, his force relieves Smith's exhausted troops. As Percy's artillery opens fire, the colonials disperse. After an hour's rest, the British depart Lexington and continue their march back to Boston. But the Americans are not quieted for long. At Menotomy, the fighting intensifies again. At times, the two sides meet hand to hand, bayonet to hatchet. And now the entire countryside has risen in resistance. By the time the British return to Charlestown, the American numbers have swollen to nearly 4,000. By nightfall, after nearly 8 hours of flight under fire, the British finally reach the safety of their warships and reinforcements sent by General Gage. The afternoon's battle has stretched over 16 miles from Meriam's Corner to Cambridge. All in all, the British have suffered 273 casualties, to just 95 for the Americans. The American response to the battles of Lexington and Concord is swift and sure. By the very next morning, April 20th, militiamen commanded by Brigadier General William Heath surround Boston. Later that day, General Artemas assumes command of the siege of Boston. Less than 3 weeks later, on May 7th, Thomas Jefferson would write to his former professor, William Small, "This accident has cut off our last hopes of reconciliation, and a frenzy of revenge seems to have seized all ranks of people." The war for independence had finally begun.